Good afternoon, students.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. So, I shared a video with you all so that you can have a look before we could start our discussions today. So if you got time to have a look, that's very good, and that will help you to develop some understanding about the problems and the devices that we are going to discuss today. If you have not got time, so after the class is over, please go back and check out the video once. That will establish a much more deeper fundamental understanding, a mathematical understanding to the device that we are going to discuss today. So let me just share my screen with you. We were discussing negative resistance devices, and we talked about tunnel diode in the last class. So today we are going to discuss another device which has a completely different, fundamentally different working principle to the tunnel diodes, but the behavior and the characteristics look somewhat same, and their usage and their applications are also, they find applications in the similar fields. Okay, so this is also another negative resistance device, negative differential resistance. That means that the IV characteristics graphs that we are going to see that will have a negative slope at some point where the voltage will increase, but along that line, if you follow, then the current is supposed to decrease, or vice versa, right? So current and voltage are not going to obey the conventional ohmic behavior where they both are proportional to each other.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, are you presenting any PPT or any file?
I'm trying to share, but I'm facing some trouble. Can you see my screen?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm facing some trouble sharing.
Yeah, it's visible.
Just let me. It's visible. Okay. Thanks.
Yes,
Thanks. So yeah. So today we are talking about a new family which are constructionally, operation principle wise, drastically different from whatever we saw in tunnel diodes. And in general, we call them transfer electron devices. We'll discuss that what is meant by that. But these are also negative differential resistance device that where you have the IV characteristics somewhat like this, right? So we discussed about these kind of IV characteristics in the last class, where they look like an S, either a S or an inverted S, something like that, where you have a region where the voltage and current are not proportional to each other, the slope is negative, right? So we talked about tunnel diode, and we saw that this kind of a characteristics curve we expect for tunnel diodes. Today we will see that how that behavior is quite reflected in a different device with a completely different working principle. So before that, let me just quickly review what we discussed, what I discussed in the video that I have shared with you previously. So in that video, we talked about the meaning, the physical meaning of negative resistance, and what kind of phenomena can occur if a substance, if a material has a negative resistance. So the first thing that I pointed out was about phase, that negative resistance can simply mean that your I and V are out of phase, 180-degree phase lag. If you have a system like that, where the voltage and current are 180-degree phase lag like this, so here you can see that when the voltage increases up to the part of time axis, if you follow, then up to the portion where the voltage was increasing, so voltage was increasing here, but the current was decreasing, right? So if you have a system where they are out of phase, then you can call that you can understand that the negative resistance device is supposed to have something like this. Okay, so this is one interpretation of negative resistance. So that was one point that I highlighted. You can follow that video and understand it better there. The second thing was the concept of active and passive devices. So here I just simply meant that the power generated or dissipated at that device is basically defined by I square R, right? So I square R is the quantity that tells you that how much power will be generated or dropped across the device. So if R is positive, then you have this amount of power dissipated at the device. But if R is negative, then the negative sign comes in front, and that simply means that instead of losing or dropping this I square R amount of power at that device, it has the ability to generate some power instead. Okay, so we call these devices active devices, and which are different from the passive devices where some power gets dropped. So that is another strikingly important feature of negative resistance devices. And finally, I talked about charge accumulation, and I did a little bit of mathematics there. I want you to follow that in that video. The bottom line, the take-home message from there was that if I have a device where negative resistance is at work, the system is at a situation where I have negative resistance present, and incidentally, if some charge heterogeneity gets produced there, that means some charge, like here you can see that some positive charge got accumulated for some reason. It can always happen inside a device, inside any material, right? But eventually the system prefers homogeneity, and this charge gets diffused in every possible direction if it is a normal device where you have positive differential resistance, where the mobility is also positive. So we, in that small derivation, we saw that how the negative resistance is dependent on the mobility, how it controls the mobility, and how if I in a device where the mobility is negative, instead of losing that charge very fast and heading towards a normal situation where there is no charge heterogeneity, in negative resistance devices, this portion, this charge heterogeneity constantly grows into a domain where you have this charge accumulation kind of a phenomena. Okay, so this expression that you see here is basically an exponential, where you can see this exponential. This I have derived in that video, so follow that, and that will guide you through that how this mu, which is the mobility, basically controls, the sign of mu basically controls that this, if a charge gets accumulated at time 0, then at time t that charge is supposed to increase or decrease. That is dependent on the sign of mu, that is the mobility in that particular device, and that depends on the negative or positive resistance of that system. Okay, so this part mathematically is explained in that video that I have shared, but the bottom line is that charge gets accumulated and high charge domains get formed inside negative resistance devices. So this is one of the properties that is going to make us understand more about the device that we are going to talk about today, and that is Gunn diodes. Okay, so these Gunn diodes basically belong to a family of devices which are called transferred electron devices, which are fundamentally different from various aspects. They are fundamentally different from the other devices that we have studied so far. So the first and most important point here is that these devices are basically bulk devices. Okay, so these devices are basically bulk devices. So what do I mean by bulk devices? There is no junction. Okay, so there is no junction, so to say. So that is the most important part, right? Till now we talked about transistors, JFETs, MOSFETs and everything, and there we saw that the junctions were the center of attraction. Everything was happening around the junction. But here I have these semiconductor devices which are bulk devices. That means we have only one kind of material, either N-type or P-type, present there in bulk. There is no junction there. So no junction. That is the most important feature of these devices. Okay. The second thing is that generally these devices are made of compound semiconductors. So these devices are made of compound semiconductors like gallium arsenide and other similar kind of materials. Okay. So why so? We will see that as well, but that is one of the fundamentally important difference, because all the devices like JFET, MOSFET we saw there, silicon, germanium, these kind of semiconductors are preferred there, which are elemental semiconductors. On the other hand, here we will see that the properties needed for the fabrication of these devices are only present in compound semiconductors like gallium arsenide. Okay, and the third important part is that this devices what we call hot electrons. So hot electrons means that their energy is much more greater than thermal energy. Their energy is very high. Okay, not just excited electrons which are which we call warm electrons, that whose energy is of the order of room temperature energy, right? KBT. If you KBT instead of Boltzmann constant time temperature, if you plug there in the temperature of a general room temperature, then you have electrons which are warm electrons. So that means that here you have to have some high voltage or high electric field applied to the device to get the effect. Okay, so to get the effect, you need to achieve very high energy electrons, which we call hot electrons. So these three are the fundamental differences that we see in this family of devices, which are called TEDs. Okay, so what is this phenomena we are talking about? Gunn diode, which was invented by J.B. Gunn, and its working principle was explained by three scientists, Ridley, Watkins, and Hilsum. So it is basically, as I said, it is basically made of one kind of semiconductor. Any p-n junction kind of a thing is not present there. Okay, so you can imagine that a single n-type material, sometimes one side of it is a little bit highly doped, like n plus, you can consider that, or the entire thing could be n-type, no problem. That is also sometimes the construction. But there is no p-type present. There is no question of depletion regions and things like that. So you have a substance like that, and then on both sides you have this metal contacts. On both sides you have this metal contacts, and the symbol of Gunn diode is something like this. Okay, so what is its action and what is the effect that we see? So J.B. Gunn, while doing his experiments, the first thing that he saw is that when in such kind of a device, you apply a very high voltage, and the voltage has to be really high. Okay, so if you apply a very high electric field, a very high voltage across this device, then suddenly the current flowing into the circuit becomes periodic, becomes a periodic oscillation. So that is the observation that he had while he was studying this kind of devices, that you had a periodic fluctuating function of time kind of a current flowing into the circuit if you apply a certain critical voltage, which is a high voltage across these devices. Okay, so and he also calculated that what was this frequency of this oscillation that he was seeing, and he saw that it is not dependent on the material or something like that. It's basically dependent on how long your device is, what is the length of the specimen that you took, the n-type specimen that you took, and something called transit time. Okay, so we will talk about these things, but the main thing is that his observation was this: so suppose you are following this kind of a device, you are applying, you have an n-type gallium arsenide, and on both sides of it you have a metal terminal, and then you have started applying some voltage. So up to a certain point of applied voltage, the current increases linearly as it is supposed to increase. But beyond a certain point, it suddenly becomes oscillatory. It suddenly becomes oscillatory beyond a certain point. So how what will be the frequency and all that he calculated, but this effect that we see here is basically called Gunn effect. Okay, so this is called Gunn effect, and this phenomena is only observed in materials like gallium arsenide. So the device that we make out of this Gunn effect is basically Gunn diode, and why this oscillations comes into the picture, that is explained by three scientists who the theory is called RWH theory, following their names, Ridley, Watkins, and Hilsum. So let us just try to understand that why this kind of a phenomena happens if you have an n-type gallium arsenide and you apply a very high voltage across it. Okay, so the phenomena that we see is basically based on something called a two-valley model. Okay, so let us talk about this. This is a fundamentally important concept to understand the operation of this kind of devices. So we came across the name of gallium arsenide before, right? So while studying the basic different structures of semiconductors, you came across this particular material. And what was the importance of this material? Anyone remembers that? What was the importance of this material, gallium arsenide? remember that what was the importance of this particular material? What were the scenarios where this kind of material were used? The EK diagram and things like that. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. So in gallium arsenide, what we have here is basically the valence band and conduction band. This is the band diagram. Okay, the valence band and conduction band is separated by the forbidden gap. But if I draw this diagram in EK space, okay, E and K become my two axes. Then the top of the valence band and the bottom of the conduction band are exactly aligned. And we use these materials for making photodiodes and all that. You have you already know, because this is the main part that is always highlighted when we discuss the material of gallium arsenide. So the thing is that if you plot the EK diagram, the conduction band and the valence band have this wavy kind of these bottom lines are very wavy in nature, and the bottom of the conduction band, which is aligned with the top of the valence band, beyond that you have another valley present very nearby. Okay, so another valley is present very nearby, which is not exactly aligned to the top of the valence band, and its energy is a little bit higher. How much higher? 0.36 electron volt higher than this bottom of conduction band. So this is the minima, which is exactly aligned to the top of the valence band. But this is another minima, another local minima, but this is at a certain higher energy than this valley number 1. Okay, so you can consider there two valleys sitting. This is valley number 1 and this is valley number 2. And if the electrons gain sufficiently higher energy, then the electrons can go and can cross this forbidden gap, move to this lower valley, and even higher energy will make them transfer from this valley to that valley. So something like that basically happens in case of gallium arsenide in this situation when we apply a really high voltage across the material. So these two valleys have these drastically different properties. Okay, so the lower valley has a mobility of electrons which is much higher than what we have in the upper valley. So the mobility of electrons are very high in the lower valley. In the upper valley, we have a low mobility of electrons. Similarly, the effective mass is also the other way. So the electron feels heavier in the upper valley, while it is very light in the lower valley. You know the definition of effective mass and mobility, so I'm not going into detail of that. But the main thing to focus here that the lower and upper valley have drastically different values of mobility. So what happens when I start increasing the voltage across such a device and I go on applying higher and higher energy in such a device? So to begin with, the electrons from the bottom of from the top of the valence band with a little bit of energy, they cross the barrier and they come to the lower valley. Okay, so they reach the lower valley. So the electrons are sitting in the lower valley, and once the energy is made a little bit higher, so the energy, when the energy is a little bit higher, the electrons start transferring from the lower valley to the upper valley. Now remember, this upper valley, though at higher energy, has a less amount of mobility. Okay, so the electrons are heavier here and their mobility are really less. As you go on increasing the energy, the electrons transfer from the lower valley to the upper valley, and the upper valley gets crowded and the lower valley becomes completely empty at a certain amount of energy. Okay, so now let us see that if the electrons are having a low amount of mobility, then the current that I have is also going to get dependent on this phenomena that is going to happen, right? So mobility will have a direct effect on the current density, as the definition suggests, right? So J is the current density, and it is given by NeV or NQV, right? N is the number, E is the electronic charge, and then the velocity. And mu is given by velocity by electric field. right? So if mu is changing overall, the system has some different values of mu. That means effectively V is changing, and if V is changing, then the current density is changing, right? So that is the definition for mu, and that is the definition for J. So if I have a system like this, here I definitely have one value of mu. Here I have a different value of mu. But in this intermediate situation, what will be the effective value of mu? So the effective value of mu will be given by something like this. So the effective value of sigma, or effective value of J, the current density, if you want to calculate and you want to plug in the value of mu there, then you have to take something like this. And what do I mean by this? Let me just explain term by term. So number of electrons in the lower valley times the mobility that I have in the lower valley, number of electrons in the upper valley, and then the mobility that I have in the upper valley, and so on. So if I sum these quantities up, then I basically have an effective amount of mobility that is being contributed by both of these family of electrons, one sitting in the lower valley and another sitting in the upper valley. So let us just try to interpret this result. So J, the current density, which is equal to sigma times E, and then which is equal to E times mu that I have plugged in instead of sigma. So this is the effective value of current density. Okay, and this current density depends on both the number present in one of the valleys and the mobility of that particular valley. Now to begin with, all the electrons were in the lower valley. Okay, so lower valley has high value of mobility. So what do you expect? The current will increase very sharply. So current was increasing very sharply. Okay, but as you increase the electric field or the voltage across the system, at a certain amount of energy, they start switching to the upper valley. As soon as they switch to the upper valley, the number of electrons in the lower valley starts decreasing, and the number of electrons sitting in the upper valley starts increasing. That means their mobility, effective mobility, basically decreases very sharply, because the mobility is quite less in the upper valley. So suddenly the current starts falling. The current starts falling as the number increases. Okay, so beyond this point where all the electrons are moved to the upper valley, beyond this point where all the electrons are moved to the upper valley, again there is no competition, and now at a constant rate the current can increase. Okay, so the current will only increase now with a different rate. The slope of these curves are definitely going to be different because the mobilities are different. Okay, so to extend more clearly, this is the velocity versus electric field graph. And here also you can expect that because mu, the mobility, is velocity by electric field, and you can plot the velocity as well in terms of the mobility. And these two lines that we have here, these two straight lines that we have here, basically points out the mobility at the upper valley and the mobility at the lower valley, which are fixed. If all of them are in lower or upper valley, then I am supposed to get a straight line. But in the intermediate state, where some of them are in lower valley and some of them in the upper valley, the switching is happening, and at that point the curve turns and starts decreasing to achieve this other slope. Okay, the other slope that we have here, this straight line. So beyond this point, the straight line again increases, and now I again have an increase in the velocity and in current as the electric field is increased. So here I have a region where the mobility and the velocity and the current density all are decreasing as you go on increasing the electric field. Okay, so if I plot a graph of current density versus electric field, that is basically a simple, that you can make a simple transition of the same graph to current versus voltage. This is basically same, right? Drawing current density versus electric field and plotting current versus voltage are basically the same thing. So this is the IV characteristics we are talking about, where you have a certain region where a negative slope is there, and thus it gives rise to a negative resistance region. Okay, so here you can see that the entire mechanism that gives rise to the negative resistance is completely different, fundamentally different from whatever we saw in case of tunnel diode. Okay, so this is the basic principle of how this device works, and this is basically the reason that why you need materials like gallium arsenide or similar compound materials, because these two valleys with this particular characteristics, that the energy difference between two valleys must be several times larger than the thermal energy. The energy difference between the two valleys must be smaller than the band gap energy. Okay, and the mobilities in the lower valley will be higher and the mobilities in the upper valley will be lower. These three things, these three conditions must hold if you want to make a gun diode with a material, and this can only be seen in materials like gallium arsenide. Okay, so this is the reason why we cannot make a gun diode using silicon or germanium, and we need materials like gallium arsenide or compound semiconductors to achieve this kind of a complicated band structure. So if you use other materials, it can also give rise to three valleys, and similar mechanism can play its role in that kind of diodes as well. And now to elaborate a little bit further, to take one more step towards understanding how that oscillations comes into the picture, I need the understanding of charge accumulation that I mentioned at the very beginning, that in this kind of materials, they become really unstable because of this really high voltage applied to these materials and the negative resistance. So negative resistance make them electrically unstable, and a constant accumulation of charge takes place. So if just imagine that I have a system where I have a really high electric field being applied, and in between somewhere I have a charge accumulated domain where a certain amount of charge got accumulated. So this kind of domains periodically come into picture, and they rush to the terminal through in a particular direction where they are attracted. So if a positive charge accumulation took place, then it moves towards the negative terminal of the battery and vice versa. So this charge accumulated domains, they move towards one terminal of battery, and this phenomena happens periodically. This continuously keeps on happening, where a strong electric field makes this high field domains come into the picture, and these high field domains travel through the entire length of the device and meet the other terminal of the battery. And because of that, you have this oscillatory behavior where continuously some charge comes, and then sometimes the charge is not there, then again a spike, and then again a charge is not there. And this is the reason why you see this oscillatory behavior in the current. Okay, so this is kind of the derivation that I already did in the video, so just try to follow that. This is basically the derivation that I have already discussed in the other video, that why this charge imbalance, that is basically the reason for the periodic oscillation in the gun effect that has been observed by JB gun in the first place, that takes place, and that is basically the charge imbalance and rushing of these high field domains to one of the terminals of the battery. Okay, so this comes into the picture because of the charge accumulation. So because of the charge accumulation only, you have this spikes arising where the current suddenly increases at a particular point in time, then again falls down to zero, then again suddenly increases, and then again falls down to zero. And this periodicity is basically dependent on how long that particular device is, what is the length of this device, right? Because the domain that got formed into the device has to travel the entire length of the n-type material to meet the battery on the other side. So that is why it depends on how long this material is. Okay, so that is why these devices are very, very suitable for making oscillators. I already told you that negative resistance means they can be made into a generator where the power can get generated at the device, and they are very suitable to make oscillators, especially microwave oscillators. Okay, so gun diodes are used in various fields as generators, as for creating these periodic signals in air traffic control, mostly in transmitters, in amplifiers, in several power oscillators, microwave receivers, and so on. Okay? So this is the general principle of how a gun diode works and how drastically different they are. from the other devices, junction-based devices that we have studied so far, and just go through the mathematics. It will solidify your understanding on the charge accumulation part, and the rest of the two-valley theory, I think you understood it, about that how the two valleys and their different mobilities can create a situation where negative resistance will come into picture. Okay, so I will stop at this point, and you can ask if you any questions, any part you have any problem in understanding, please go ahead and ask.
Ma'am, here the oscillations comes due to the jumping from one valley to the another valley.
No, the for jumping from one valley to another valley, the negative resistance comes. The negative resistance comes because in one valley the carriers were moving very fast, in the other valley they are moving really slowly, and they try to join in the lower line from the upper line, and that is why the negative resistance comes. Now, if we have a negative resistance, their charge accumulation will happen, because charge accumulation is kind of a property in negative resistance devices. Okay, there in any negative resistance device, if you have some charge accumulated by chance at a particular point, the system does not encourage it to diffuse, but it encourages it to accumulate further, to grow into a domain. Okay, so if you have a negative resistance inside a material, the charge accumulate, and if you have an accumulated charge, that will rush to one of the terminals of the battery. If I have an accumulation of positive charges, it will rush to the negative terminal of the battery, and periodically this thing is going to happen. Sometime or other, some charge accumulation will take place, and it will rush to one of the terminals of the battery. So how long it will take, whenever the charge reaches the terminal of the battery, you will see a spike in the current, and that is why the oscillation will take place. Okay, because as soon as you have an accumulated charge rushing and reaching the negative terminal of the battery, the current will suddenly jump and it will fall down again. Again, the current will jump and fall down. Periodically, this thing is going to happen, because periodically charges are going to get accumulated, forming some domains inside the gun. Okay, so negative resistance comes because of the two valleys, and because of this negative resistance, charge accumulation happens, and because of charge accumulation, the high field domains get created, which are responsible for the periodic oscillations. Okay, so does it understand your question? Does it answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So let us stop at this point. I will request you to just go through this entire operation of Gunders. I will send a PDF to further clarify whatever we have discussed. I will just prepare a write-up and send it to you, because this particular portion is not very much available in many textbooks. So I will send a text document to go through it, and also try to work out the mathematics that we did. That needs a very basic understanding of Maxwell's equation. That's it. You can derive those equations, I believe, and let us discuss further if you have any troubles in the next class. Okay, so I will stop at this point and see you guys in the next class. Any further questions? No questions? Okay, so let us stop here, and let us meet next week with further discussion